and welcome to Gaming the System, the show where we look at gaming through a feminist lens. I haven't hosted for a while, so I've completely forgotten how to do this and only just remembered to get my notes up, but it's fine. I know what we're doing. I know why we're here. You will notice that there are only 3 of us today, and that's because unfortunately Matt's not very well, so we send lots of love to Matt and hope he feels better. But you just have the 3 of us today, and for equity I will move us all around so that everybody has a share of the big screen as we go along, but I won't do it constantly because apparently that makes people dizzy. So, I don't know. Right, so today we are talking about E3. Woohoo! The big gaming exhibition, I suppose is the word, that happens every year, and obviously last year and this year it's mostly gone online, which has made it quite a lot more accessible, a lot easier to watch, and there's all sorts of new games to talk about. I have literally got something like, I have 8 pages of notes, so let's not talk, most of it's shit, so we won't talk about it. But I have really enjoyed it. It has made me get really excited about gaming again in lots of ways. I was really excited about it, but it has, like, I have spent the last few days going, I want to play this, I want to play that, I'm going to get this out, I'm going to pull this out. So I'm going to just start off, because I'm overexcited, by asking you two what excited you the most. What did you see at E3 that you thought was the most exciting? I'll start with you, Alex.
Okay, I'm going to go off kilter and say the things I was most excited about, which is kind of a backwards answer, is things that probably weren't even in E3. Ooh. Which is complicated, I know, and you have to throw in your mind. But it's just basically because a lot of the games I'm looking forward to weren't featured. So I was happily waiting for them, and will wait for them as and when they decide to disclose more. But beyond that, there wasn't really an awful lot that I got massively fired up about, let's be honest. And that is where I'll leave it. But there are things I liked, obviously. I can talk about those, but I'll leave those for later on in discussion.
That's fine. Yeah. I just feel like I was an overexcited puppy now. And I was like, oh, no.
No, it's fine. E3 is about getting hyped. That's what it's for.
I'm so easily hyped. But Jem, I'm going to move you to the big screen now.
Oh, no. Well, many years ago, I actually thought there was going to be a possibility that at some point in the near future, I would be able to go to E3, because when I was working briefly in the games industry, that was what I wanted to eventually go into. And I thought, this is good. I'm going to be going. And I was so excited about the idea of it. I used to watch every year. I used to look at, what was going on and all of that. I mean, that was obviously back before we had Zoom. So it's a bit weird for me this time, because it kind of came around without me even noticing it, because I don't have the time for it, and I've struggled a lot to actually have the time to actually take a proper look at it, but I have been just like you said, Caroline, it's just infused me. There's so many games out there, there's so much fun stuff coming. I think it's just nice to just immerse in games, and I spent a very happy afternoon while I was cleaning yesterday with YouTube on, playing a video about videos about the best bits and the worst bits and all the games that have come. And so it was just nice to be immersed in that sort of enthusiastic environment. And I think the thing for me is that the big name games are not the sort of games that I generally tend to play. So for me, some of the big announcements weren't as exciting as some of the smaller little tweaky things that I was finding today. So yeah.
I like what you say though as well, because I think that is not to call you and me middle-aged women, but I watched most.
Say it like you see it.
I watched most of the E3 footage while I was cooking over the last few days, but it was great to be able to live stream it on my laptop while I was, making dinner and doing various other things around the house. Because let's be fair, if I'm going to be critical about one thing from E3, I'm going to be critical about a lot of things, but the one thing I cannot bear, the in-between not so much the panels, but like when they cut to the presenters on the stage, and it's. I mean, it's worse than Eurovision. It's worse than the sort of, hello, we're going to a cheesy segue now. But I'll come back to complaining about that earlier. But yeah, the ability to fast forward that was something very important.
Yeah, that watch again is not to be knocked.
Exactly.
On many levels.
Fast forward. So the thing that I'm going to kick off then with something that excited me. I'll put myself back on the big screen. I promise I won't do this all night. So I was excited about a lot of things, but the thing that I'm going to start by talking about is because I don't think either of you really. I'm the only Nintendo gamer here, really. Ish. Well, I suppose Jem, you do have a Switch, don't you? Do you love Mario?
I am not a big fan of Mario, actually, but I have played quite a lot of Mario because my daughter does really like it.
Yeah,
so,
it was the Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope trailer, which for me was really, really exciting. And I haven't got a picture queued up, but I
will take your word for it.
Like, I loved the Rabbids games on the Wii. The first Rabbids game on the Wii was just brilliant. I played that for hours and hours and hours and had so much fun out of that. It's also one of the reasons I always have girls just want to have fun stuck in my head because of any game with that in it. I love Mario Galaxy. I've always loved Mario Galaxy, but I haven't played the Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom thingamajig, which is why I've now decided I'm getting a Switch, because if they're making a Sparks of Hope one that has Rabbid Rosalina in it and little Lumas that are Rabbids, I'm so excited and everything about it. So I have ordered a Switch. Well, I haven't actually. I've asked for it for my birthday because I'm a grown middle-aged woman, and I am getting a Switch in July just on the basis of that game. But neither of you like Mario, do you?
Well, it's the gameplay's actually kind of taken or lifted from XCOM, isn't it?
Yeah,
that kind of mechanic. So it's quite interesting how they've taken that mechanic and applied it to something like Mario and Rabbids. It's not what you would expect. So it's quite interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not entirely anti-Mario. I've got Mario Party written down here on my list of games that I was inspired by today. So, you know, I could possibly be converted. If you get Animal Crossing and help me with my islands, then maybe I'll come. Willing to
I hadn't thought of that. We get to do some of that. It's annoying we can't easily stream from Nintendo because we'd have to get, maybe if anybody watching wants to chuck us some money so we can get just get capture cards each and then start doing it. I am just going to put up a quick. No, I'm not. I'll have to put that up later because apparently I haven't saved in the right place. So, Jen, go on then. If there's one game that you really want to play out of it that you saw, what's one game that you're really looking forward to playing that you saw at E3?
Well, because I can never answer any of your questions straight, I have to. Nothing actually leapt out at me and went, go out and buy this. I was really excited when I saw Elden Ring, and I was like, oh, that looks amazing. And then I looked at it a bit more and I was like, no, it does look amazing and I do want to try it, but I sort of wasn't as inspired by it, but I may just need to see more about it. But actually the one that I was really interested was Immortality by which is a little bit silly because there was literally like barely any information about it at all. It wasn't really more than a cover. So, you know, they do say don't judge a book by its cover. So
I've managed to put it behind us. Yeah, I know why, and I'll fix that in a second. So
that's kind of representative, really, of how little information there was about the game. So, but it is by Sam Barclaw. I can't read my writing because I've written it in really faint pen. But they worked on Her Story and also Silent Hill, which are two games that I really liked. And I felt that, I mean, we've talked about Her Story before, and it's such a break from the norm as far as games go. And this just sounded really intriguing. So I do quite like the mystery I'm not into like normal like murder mysteries and those kind of games, but I like the games that are a little bit different from normal. So I feel like it's a little bit, you know, they literally just gave a teaser and I've gone, yeah, me, I'm in. But I also heard the producer speaking, and she was a woman, so you know, that was the other thing. I don't think that was Sam speaking who I heard, so I should have taken more notes in a darker pen, really, shouldn't I?
It's fine. It's just it's what they always say. It's like nobody remembers what you said or, you know, what you did. It's how they made you feel.
Well, hopefully everyone's really excited. They're feeling really excited about immortality. I can't tell you anything about it because I don't know. It's sort of a mystery game, I think.
By the way, I have now, as you can see, fixed our display, so we no longer have to worry about who's got the biggest face. So that's fine. Alex, what game do you want to play that you thought?
Well, this could come under the category of my most disappointing thing, but that I can talk about some more later. But it was 12 minutes, and it's not on PlayStation, I don't think. So I was like, darn. Why isn't it?
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was thinking that a good segue from what Jem was just talking about is to 12 minutes. So
yeah, and it just looked really interesting. I didn't see too much about it, but it intrigued me, and I want to know more. And it looked like the kind of game that I would enjoy, definitely. Yeah, I'm not really sure what it's about, but it looks very good. It's got Willem Dafoe in it, I think. That was the kind of main takeaway.
I was like, Dafoe, Daisy Ridley, and no one going to finish my sentence.
No.
James McAvoy.
Oh, okay.
I love James McAvoy.
See, that's an immediate sell. Yeah.
Well, we have a running thing in our house of whenever we watch a film that's got James McAvoy in it, at the beginning of it, we have a bet on whether he's going to be shaved or not shaved, because they quite often shave McAvoy for films. So is it shaved or not shaved? So when we watched the trailer together for this, and we were going, do you think they bothered shaving him just for a voiceover? But, you know. But the trailer just showed this, basically.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I did see a bit about this.
And it said something about a time loop.
Yeah.
And so it gives the impression that it's a sort of cerebral, clever game that's all just set in this one room.
Wow.
With stuff going on and a time loop and stuff. And so I was wondering if it was a bit Stanley Paradox. Have either of you two played the Stanley Paradox?
I've watched it on YouTube.
Yeah.
I know of it. Yes.
And so I feel like there maybe is a bit of that, but taking itself a bit more seriously. But really impressed, though, to see people like Daisy Ridley and James McAvoy doing, and obviously Willem Dafoe, but Willem Dafoe will do anything. Doing something like this, though. It's nice to have big stars in the games. And I was thinking the same with like Far Cry 6. Did either of you see the Far Cry 6 stuff? And
I did.
I'm not a huge Far Cry fan. I think the last one I played was Far Cry 3, because it felt it was getting a bit samey. Boys with guns running around, fighting jungles. I'm more interested in the thing. But, you know, having Giancarlo Esposito there and just the facial realism of his acting. If anyone wants to, he's in Breaking Bad, where he's most famously known from, more recently in The Mandalorian, which is where I love him from. And it's like having an actor that you like in stuff is almost enough to make you want to play it.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think it is a big draw, definitely more now so, because obviously there's more bigger stars moving into games, and I think they see that there's a market they can tap there, and kind of that it is almost a valid form of acting, if you will, as well. You know, it's not just a random sort of side project that, or maybe they want to do or to try something new. It's actually a valid thing that a lot of people are doing nowadays. So, yeah.
Because Jem, you're a Johnny Depp fan. Do you see he was in? So I wasn't meant as like an attack.
A recovering Johnny Depp fan.
But, you know, did you? They're releasing this new expansion for Pirate Thieves. It's not called Pirate.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Skull and Bones.
I don't know anything about it. I just saw that they were doing it. They just flicked through it on one of the things.
If we ever figure out a way for us all to play games, Sea of Thieves is one of those things we should all be playing.
Yeah, that's the one. Sorry. Yes, there's too many pirate games out there. I got confused. I said Skull and Bones. But yeah.
Yeah, Sea of Thieves is, I mean, I've watched videos of it. I haven't played it, but I have watched videos of some of my favourite streamers playing it. And it's, I mean, classic Caroline, I'm like, yay, you get to drink beer. I'm sure there's other bits to it, but there's a bit of the game where you get to drink beer. So I'm like, yay, that's a cool thing.
It's in the game, though, not real life.
Could do both. Makes it more realistic.
But yeah, so I was quite, again, because they've got Johnny Depp to do the voice for the Pirates of the Caribbean, and it did look like it's basically the first Pirates of the Caribbean film just literally chucked into Sea of Thieves directly. I'm not sure how that works, but we shall see. We shall see. All right, then, I'll give you a chance to moan now. Alex, go on. Tell us about your biggest disappointment then from E3. What was the thing that disappointed you the most?
I don't want to be too negative. I'm very conscious that we are still currently living in a global pandemic, so naturally everyone's workflow and that has been on a lower level, so we're not going to get peak games from everybody. But generally speaking, I think a lot of the shows, particularly from individual games developers and companies, were a bit lackluster, generally speaking. There wasn't that much there to shout about in terms of trailers. There's a lot of like cinematic trailers rather than gameplay trailers, and a lot of padding and things like this is an update to this game that's already been out for 5 years or whatever. So there wasn't a great deal of like really meaty stuff. I mean, I might be wrong. Other people get very excited about all sorts of different things, which is totally valid, of course. But I just felt like I wasn't as blown away as I have been in previous E3s, generally, which is a very, very sort of vague answer, but hopefully.
No, but and I think there is, I mean, I was watching one of my favourite streamers, Vertigo. I was watching him watch E3. Meta. I was watching him watch the whole Xbox Bethesda presentation, and the end of that, his reaction was just basically, I mean, he's Australian, so he swears a lot, and it's sort of like, it's not as insulting when you say it as an Australian, but he was just, what the fuck was, etc., etc. It was just like, yeah, and I understand, like, I mean, a lot of people have said the Xbox Bethesda presentation was brilliant, but the disappointment, and this, so I'm basically just answering my question now. My big disappointment with Starfield was, and as you say, there's been a global pandemic, so yeah, we appreciate things aren't getting on as fast, but Starfield was announced in 2018 at E3, and it is meant to be the next big open world Skyrim, you know, the sort of, but in space and stuff. Like, it's meant to be the new big thing that is going to be so me and I'm going to love. And it's 3 years later, and we got the tiniest. It wasn't even, like, as teaser trailers go, it was really short. It was, woman got up in a spaceship and walked to the cockpit, looked at a date, which, as in that video you sent us earlier, Jen, the guy described as a release date that they probably won't hit. And stealing jokes there from other people on YouTube. And that was it. And I was like, well, I want to see more of Starfield. I want to know more. And I'm disappointed that Starfield was my big disappointment. It's like, it's 3 years, guys. Come on.
Another thing also I've just remembered, they showed a lot of trailers for films. And I'm like, but that's not a game. Is it okay that films are a part of E3? I don't know. We'll discuss that more later. But
like, I mean, we might come back to that actually. But I was thinking the same from the Ubisoft section. I mean, I have actually then gone and tracked down something from the Ubisoft section. But anyway, I'm going to ask Jen what her disappointment was first.
Well, I think I'd echo what you both actually. I think you know, it didn't have that pizzazz, certainly for me. Most of the games seemed to be sequels or just sort of filler games, and I think, you know, but I guess that's part of the pandemic is, you know, is has had that massive knock-on effect, and we're starting to see that now. I think that it's frustrating because a lot of the games were for Xbox, and some of us have gone out and bought a PS5. So we're like, but although I do own an ancient Xbox, I'm a PS player really, or a PC player, and so a lot of the games were not necessarily geared to me as an audience. But also, even if you are a PC gamer, you can't get a graphics card for love nor money at the moment. Well, you can for a lot of money. And I think that's a frustration. So it doesn't really matter what they were showing at this show, because most of us, the vast majority of us, are not able to actually access those games right now, and there's no real light at the end of that tunnel at the moment. They're sort of saying that this problem is going to go on until the end of the year. So I think it's almost like, like when you see those fashion shows and people are wearing clothes that no normal person is going to wear in the high street, and they're all like, oh, this is going to be the next, the autumn's fashion, and it's going to be a very watered down version that actually comes into the shops. And I think it almost had that same feel. If it had been more fancy, it would have been even more sort of sticking the knife in. But as far as sort of real disappointments go, I have to talk about Astria Ascending. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. Just because this woman walked onto the screen in their they did a little demo video, and I think I've got a picture. This woman walks onto the screen, and I was just like, oh my god, she's just breasts. It's just these really pointy boobs, and I was like, what is going on? And look at those thighs. The dimensions are just astounding. I mean, that photo, and then she stops and she puts her hand on her hip, and it's like, okay, so she's wearing some reasonably kick-ass armor, but her whole chest is not only exposed, but like a real kind of hack hazard. And I just, it just made me go, oh, this is why we do what we do.
I guess they've had to give her a ridiculously long neck, because otherwise she'd be hitting her chin on her boobs every time. No, and I'm glad you sort of put that as your disappointment, because it's a lovely segue into talking about, like, do we think that games are more progressive? Like, because we are gaming the system. We're here to talk about feminism and gaming and playing games as a woman. Looking at E3, did you feel there was progress, or did you feel there was not? And so obviously that one's going in the not column. That's going in the, like, really? Are we? I'm putting that back up again.
Yeah.
Are we still making games where characters look like? Because I understand that, like, manga has its own style, and there's a sort of particular not heritage, but sort of history to why people draw like that. That is not manga. That is just ridiculous proportions.
Yeah.
So, did we see any progress at E3? Dive in.
Well, I think they want to be seen like they are, but I feel like a lot of it is probably quite performative still. I particularly got those vibes from Ubisoft, but we all know why that is. I feel like it's almost tokenistic the way they're putting more, like, they get people to talk, when they do, like, behind the scenes of games, and they've got, like, the developers and things, and they're kind of even men and women, which is obviously, like, the truth. That's who they are, that's what they do, that's their jobs. But it does feel a bit like, oh, they're only doing it now because they've been pulled up for this 6 months ago or whatever it was. I don't know, maybe I'm too cynical.
No, I thought exactly the same. I thought, and I was sort of almost doing like a head count of visual genders, race, disability, queer representation as we were going through, especially the behind the scenes stuff. And it was interesting that Ubisoft was the most visually diverse, which, as you say, you can't help but think they've gone, oh shit, we've got a sexual harassment problem. How are we going to deal with that? Let's just overdose. People of color, women, disabled. They did a whole section on accessibility in gaming, and obviously we shouldn't, like, criticize if genuinely trying, but it felt performative from Ubisoft, particularly because it was so over the top compared to some other areas. What did you think, Alec? I don't know if you got to watch much of the behind the scenes interview stuff in between.
I think I've seen more commentary than the actual footage from the show, but I have to say that I think I've seen two women today. One was being interviewed about a game, and the other one was interviewing a man about the game. So I don't. There wasn't a lot of diversity. There was one one show that was really good. Again, they were doing commentary on the indie games, and I think it was GameSpot. GameSpot, and they had somebody else on another organization on. I'm so sorry for not knowing all the right names. We can put them in the text, but they were both sort of not non-white, but they were both men still. So there was that. That was it. I mean, it was very. I think it just demonstrates, doesn't it, that the industry doesn't have enough. But they did talk in that show. They did talk about diversity. They in the intro they said that they were really pleased to see that a lot of the indie games were really sort of focusing on diversity and trying to be more inclusive in their gaming. I didn't really get quite how they were doing that, but that was how they introduced it. And then they did later talk about black and brown people being more represented in the industry and within actual games. So they did have a conversation about that, and I don't think we would have necessarily had that conversation maybe even a year ago, certainly not 2 years ago. So yeah, I think that was that. There was that, but that was a commentary that wasn't part of the actual event. So,
well, I did think like the panels I saw that were the voices of E3, which is what they're calling the panels. Like I watched they had their reflecting the real world in video games, which was their way of talking about representation and saying how much are we reflecting people's lived experiences. And they had some really interesting people on there. I think actually that was the one that had somebody called Daniel Eriksson, who looks a bit like our Daniel Eriksson, but wasn't Daniel Eriksson, because I sent Jem a screenshot. Yeah, anyway, we'll discuss that later. But they were talking in a very the sort of stuff we talk about. And then I sort of watched another panel later on, and it was mental health in video games. I was like, this is what we talk about. And I found it really interesting that the voices of E3 I'm not saying they're stealing our ideas, but I did think it's like it was good that at least while I didn't feel this from the developers, but I felt from the people organizing E3, there was definitely a lot more of an effort to sort of have the sort of conversations we want to see the games industry having. Alex, I don't know. Alex, our disabled correspondent.
Yeah.
What I was going to raise, and I will let you talk about it rather than just me wittering on, but was that in the games, I felt that there were visibly women, there were visibly people of color, there was even visibly queer people. What I didn't feel was that there was visible disability in any of the games I saw.
I certainly didn't see any. So I would agree. Yeah.
And I mean, the panel was talking about real world representation, was saying, we're meant to be fantasy worlds. So while we should represent people's experiences, we also are meant to be a fantasy world. And I felt that was quite insulting.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah. That is, but like, what are you saying? It's just, that disabled people don't exist in the world of fantasy. That disability doesn't exist because it's too horrible and it's not supposed to be a happy place. I don't know. Yeah.
So I think there's still some pretty serious barriers to be overcome there. Which
it's almost, I mean, going back to the performative point, it's much easier, isn't it, to change the skin color, the skin and hair color of your characters than it is to work out how you deal with somebody who can't necessarily walk or has some other sort of disability that impedes them physically getting around in your game environment. I'm not suggesting that's an excuse, but I'm saying that, you know, that's why it's like it's an easy win to put in, you know, a woman not in her underwear. And well, I mean, apparently it's really difficult to do that, but for some people,
yes,
but,
we have had a comment here that obviously the Guardians of the Galaxy game, that the guy from the bad guy. I mean, I think really it's the bad girl, Daniel. But yes, it's also because she has to wear a swimsuit, and it's like, yeah. But that's the problem with having games based on 1960s comics as well, of course, I suppose, is that they have very 1960s values. But you can update them. It doesn't have to be... Anyway. But I was going to say one thing, and I was hoping I could, you know, in the bit where Ubisoft was doing about accessibility in games, because as I say, Ubisoft had gone above and beyond to prove how wonderfully progressive they were. But I did find really interesting they were talking about Watch Dogs, Watch Dogs Legion, I think it is, and saying how they put loads of accessibility.
They have. I know from playing the trial weekend when it was on a couple of months ago, I think. There were so many accessibility settings. It took me like 10 minutes to get through them all. I'm not complaining, but yeah, it was really good to see. And they've done similarly in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, but not on the same scale. I think in Watch Dogs it was ramped up, so you could have all these different color settings for different levels of color blindness. You could have. They always have voice. I can't remember what you call it when they read the menus out. Audio descriptions. No, maybe.
Well, audio descriptions on menus make sense.
And then you have to turn it off at the start, so you can keep it on if you want it read to you, which is really good. But yeah, there's all sorts of things that were never in games like a couple of years ago that they've put in now, which was really nice to see.
I thought the directional sound options was brilliant. Like they can have it so that on the screen it will say like gunshot to your top left and stuff like that.
I noticed that.
Like, that is groundbreaking. I haven't seen that anywhere. It's the stuff we need. Should be in all games as standard.
Yeah, it does help for finding collectibles as well. I noticed I had it turned on in Valhalla for a little while, and it would say wealth tinkling to your left. So you turn left and there'd be some treasure, and I'd be like, oh, it was there. That's good.
I will admit that I actually did really consider buying Assassin's Creed Valhalla for our PS4.
I'm very much enjoying it. I'm very much enjoying it. So
after watching the Ubisoft bits on it, I mean, the bit that got me was the bit about the music. I don't know why. I was just like, the work that's gone into this sort of Gaelic traditional music. I was like, oh, I need to play this game. I can't. As I say, I wanted to spend £1 million after watching this. Not really exaggerating. So, Jem, haven't heard from you in a while. So I'm just going to pick on you. I want to talk about Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. You want to talk about Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. I've talked too much. You talk about Tiny Tina's Wonderlands.
Oh no, I thought you were going to do it. So no, I just Tiny Tina's Wonderland really appealed to me actually, and I haven't played Borderlands, which apparently they were sort of saying, oh, it's a spin-off from Borderlands, but it's but a lot of the sort of commentators were saying it's not, it's its own thing, and the interview that I heard about it, the producer, she was saying that that it's not it's you can play it even if you've never stuck a toe in Borderlands like me, and it just looked a lot of fun, and I really liked the idea that it's that Tiny Tina, whoever she is basically playing a role-playing game, and so she dictates sort of what's going on in the game, and she changes her mind and things as part of the depending on how the characters are reacting to the story, and I liked that, because we've talked about role-playing games and D&D and all of that, which I enjoy, and I know Caroline does, and Alex, have you played?
I've played one time. This was many years ago with an ex-boyfriend, but I'm not saying I wouldn't be open to it
No, we need to get a session going, don't we?
Yeah, we should.
But I just really liked the idea that they were taking that and then putting it into a computer game, because that's sort of merging the whole sort of thing that we've been talking about, it being a merge. So that really appealed to me, and the style and the color and the movements, all of that appealed to me. But yeah, I've never played Borderlands, so I don't know. But
well, I've watched my
into.
other half play Borderlands. It was a few years ago actually now, but yeah, he played that on the PlayStation while I was playing something else on the PC. So we were in the same room, and I enjoy. I mean, it's much more, the setting is much more Mad Max type style, post-apocalyptic sort of thing. But I do remember I enjoyed the humor. I mean, I'm not saying there wasn't some misogynistic humor in there, but I did enjoy the humor of the game, and it looked like really good gameplay, but I just never got around to playing it because it's not kind of my environment. So when I saw that trailer and it basically said Borderlands in a fantasy environment, and the cast as well, it was like Andy Samberg from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Wanda Sykes, who I absolutely love. There was loads of other people as well. I remember my notes just say stellar cast.
Yeah.
But I was so excited, and I was like, actually, I really, really want to play this. My other note is that it was the first woman developer I've noticed in this Gearbox software section.
That was who I meant, not on Immortality. It was on Tiny Tina's Wonderland.
That's right, I remember now. Yes.
No, it does look it went on to Tribes of Midgard, which does look quite cool, because clearly Vikings are in at the moment.
Vikings are massively in, aren't they? I was just like, where is all this Viking love coming from?
But did you see that though? The giant.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did.
Really cool. They were like giant,
massive.
Well, I was wondering, because it was interesting that the Tribes of Midgard was a bit sort of like, it looked to me like a good co-op game, a good thing to play like with your partner or whoever. But it was the go out, gather, get things, but then go back up again. And come down, and so it's like you can't lose all your stuff again. It's like you sort of store it and things. I was interested with that, but that and Godfall they both looked amazing, but it just also was bros.
Yeah, very much. Yeah,
and it kind of, the reason I bring it up is because it kind of felt like Tiny Tina's Wonderlands was the, here you go, ladies.
This one's for you.
For the ladies. Yeah. And it's worked because me and Jem are both psyched about it.
And it had a unicorn in it.
What was it called? Butt Dragon.
I'm guessing this. Yeah. Sorry.
What was it? The unicorn was called Butt Dragon or something, wasn't it? I think I remember.
Yeah.
I was like,
so, Her Royal Highness.
Yes.
It's very.
It reminds me of another famous sectional horse, Toffee Apple
Keep talking.
But yes.
No, seriously, you keep talking. I'm looking for the unicorn, guys.
Unicorn. I mean, it was pretty cool when it came up out of nowhere in the middle of the trailer.
Oh, and again, it's what we're saying.
I'm assuming that people who understand Borderlands knew what it was, but I don't know. It's because I never played it. But people were getting very excited about it.
No, Borderlands is like, it's sort of what they call it, a looter shooter, you know. You run around, collect stuff, just shoot enemies as you go along. You get given missions, side missions, the same sort of usual sort of thing on that. So it's like, but to do that in a fancy world, it's like, it's like,
I don't like those post-apocalyptic environments. I had the same thing with another really popular game set in a post-apocalyptic world, with the one with the little small boy on the logo.
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. Make your point and I'll tell you what it's called by the time.
Bio something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh no, we're going to talk about BioShock.
No. Not BioShock. But I don't like those environments, and I think I've talked about it before, but it has a real impact on my ability to play a game if I don't like the environment that I'm in. And I don't mean that I can't play a game that has like not a pretty environment. But I don't want to only be in a town. I don't want to only be in a really miserable, depressing world. I mean, I game for fun, so for me, it's there's got to be an element of I don't know, something escapism for me. I just can't hack those kind of worlds. So that's always what's put me off those kind of games. And I think, you know,
no, I brought up Somerville.
More bright.
Somerville had this really classy cinematic trailer, family escaping from an alien, and it was interesting looking at the trailer. It seemed to mostly be the family escape. They didn't seem to be actually fighting the aliens at any point. It seemed to more be like they were just evading and running all the time. But my problem with it was the fact that it was a heteronormative, westernized, idealized view of a family. It was just like, it starts off with the dad's sitting up on the sofa and the mum's asleep on his lap and the little kids sitting next to them. And it just felt very, it just felt really sort of like, I'm not saying everything has to be diverse all the time, but it felt very sort of 50s American, like, this family's got to save themselves from this alien invasion sort of thing, you know. Which is a shame. It's, as I say, it was a really classy, cinematic looking type of video. But before that, I'd seen the trailer for Party Animals, which was cute, fluffy animals fighting each other, and I was like, I want this. I want this now.
That one looks a lot like Gang Beasts, isn't it? By the same people.
It's exactly what it says on my notes, Alex. Yeah. It says it looks very Gang Beast. Yes. And it was the action was very Gang Beasty. Again, another good one for us all.
That one is good fun. Yeah.
I would like to mention about Dark Pictures Anthology.
Oh yeah.
They were bringing out a new thing, and I really looked into that because they were saying it's a story driven horror. And I was like, oh, that looks interesting. And then I realized that I sort of looked at the video. They were doing an interview, and it was so they were showing some footage from the game, and it looked really cool. But then they sort of started talking about it in a bit more detail, and he was saying, oh yeah, you know, that there is something like 150 ways to die in the game, like not for necessarily for you, but for character, you know. So like there are 100 odd different ways that people die, and he was just talking about all the blood. He was saying there's a lot of blood, and I was like, for me, I want scary horror. I don't, you know, like that's what I like about Resident Evil, for example, is that I mean there is quite a lot of blood in that, and there is quite a lot of gore, but there's also a huge amount of sort of tension and atmosphere and everything, and I was just a bit worried about whether or not but it did appeal to me, and I thought, oh, I need to maybe look into that.
The ones I know from it
very into gore when I was younger, so it's sort of like I find it difficult to do the sort of grown up, I'm a feminist and have progressive issues with things, because I was very into gore, but I don't find it, there's a lot of things I can't go back and watch now because of that. Alex, do you like scary games?
I don't really, no, as you know, because I'm quite a jumpy person anyway. I don't mind. I mean, I've watched some of them on YouTube, but for judging, I was kind of judging to see whether I'd be happy playing it, and I'd be like, I totally wouldn't be happy, because there's so many jump scares, and I'm just like, that would just make me feel really uncomfortable, because I'd be wondering when they're going to happen every 5 minutes. But I watched Until Dawn on YouTube, which is one I think they've done, and then one I think it was set on a boat in the ocean, and it was about people on this ghost ship, which is a very similar sort of thing. I think they're all from the Dark Pictures Anthology, but they basically have one narrator character who's like the therapist / person in the person's head or whatever, and they're talking to you as the player, and that's how you make the decisions and things, because they like push you one way or another. So the story itself I quite enjoy, even as a person who doesn't generally like horror, even in films or books or anything. But no, as a game I can see why people play, but I wouldn't play myself. No, I like to watch it though.
Well, the last game that I was going to mention in my sort of like, you know, unlikely things for me to, well, not that unlikely, but was Stalker 2, Heart of Chernobyl. And I really didn't think I'd like this because I play a bit of first-person shooter, but I'm generally quite dismissive of it. I'm like, once you've got Call of Duty, what else do you need? And my notes, in fact, say, men, shoot. And then at the end of the note, I've written, However, it looked really good. And it was a really good trailer. And I was actually, by the end of it, just going, actually, that's quite good. As opposed to Battlefield 2042. 2042, thank you. Can't do numbers. It just, again, I just felt like, is it bringing anything new? It's like, all right, yeah, there was a parachute, but it's like, how many, like, what was it said in the trailer? It said, for people who want to experience total war. I'm like, one, who wants that? And two, there's enough of these games. It's like, I want to see more innovation, more change.
Did you see any games that had, other than that very busty lady, did you see any games that had like female protagonists?
I felt like a lot of the story sequels did. So Starfield had a female protagonist, but what was it?
I saw that they're bringing in Life is Strange, True Colors. Yeah, and
the new Rainbow Six game as well had women everywhere. And again, this is Ubisoft overcompensating. I think it was like the Rainbow Six Extraction trailer. There was an Asian woman as the protagonist. There was a woman leader of the army. Everybody, the woman behind the armory thing that was giving out the guns was a woman. It was like my note literally says "woman" everywhere.
Yeah.
So I think, I think in Ubisoft we saw a lot of that, and again, like the bits they showed of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which I don't think is all women or anything like that.
No, it's obviously you can play female Eivor or male Eivor, and female Eivor is actually canon, even though they went with the male Eivor for most of the marketing, just like in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, where you think Sandra was really more of a canon character, but they went with Alexios for all of the marketing, which I think says more about the marketing side of things and what the execs think will sell compared to what the developers want, which is a female protagonist and not a male version.
I think, basically, I felt that once you went past Ubisoft and a bit of as well the Bethesda Xbox presentation, again, because there's this sort of pressure on them to performatively go, no, we're for everybody. It was only the indie games really where I saw women and queer people as well. There was a particularly good queer representation in some of the indie games, but not in any of the major sort of things. I cannot find my notes on the really cool game I saw where there was all sorts of cool shaved heads, sort of like interesting relationships going on and stuff like that, but there was a lot of that from the indie developers. But the big developers, it was, we've put a woman and she's not white.
Yeah.
And I think that I was like, job done now, right? I thought Back for Blood was interesting because I think I've complained to you guys before about Left 4 Dead. How like it's a brilliant zombie game in terms of shooting zombies. It's really well set up. I absolutely love that game. But there is one female character basically that you get to be, and she says, in between when you're fighting zombies, like they all have like little set lines that they say, like, hey, get out of my face, or if you shoot each other as well, as like a sort of like, whoa, and all the girl lines are like, oh, somebody go get me a gun, oh, you'll have to help me now, and stuff like that. So it was interesting to see they've made a sequel called Back for Blood, and there was a lot of women characters in the trailer, but I would be surprised if they're not horribly tropey. All right, we've just managed to talk about I got so into all the games at E3 that
that's kind of the thing, isn't it?
I haven't done proper questions and structure. I just we do have to talk about one more game, which so Daniel mentioned early on that you got a Switch just for Breath of the Wild. I love Zelda. I am a massive Zelda fan. I've played every Zelda game. I love Zelda games. Zelda games are the best things in the world. So when I say like I don't like story games, remind me that I love Zelda games, not story games. And I kind of felt from everything I read that the trailer for Breath of the Wild 2 was kind of like the winner of E3. Like,
Sorry, I'll be honest.
Yeah, that's the best thing that we've seen. Is that just because people know it will be good because every Zelda game's brilliant? Or was it worthy of the hype? I say this to two people who don't like Zelda games and probably have never played them.
Yeah. Well,
I have played quite a few Zelda games.
Okay, good.
Go ahead, Alex.
I've not played any, but it looked good. And I know that my friend who loves Zelda will probably really love this. So I would agree with you there on that level. But as a person who has never played Zelda, I can't really comment. So I'll let Jim comment.
Well, I thought it looked like a Zelda game, so and I think Zelda. I mean, Zelda is iconic, and it's my daughter's played her way through. I played most of Wind Waker and then got really cross because I just got stuck in the island in the sea, and I kept getting attacked by things and having to go into like random encounter combat constantly, and it just got really annoying. I have very low patience when it comes to games, and if it's like too much, then so I never finished it, but she finished it, and she started playing it again not that long ago, and she's also and we did get a Switch because of Wind Waker. No, not Wind Waker. Because of Breath of the Wild, yeah. And I've played other ones over the years. And I've played Breath of the Wild as well, and I haven't finished it, but my daughter has finished it twice. So I think it's just such a solid game. It's a beautiful environment, and the world is so imaginative, and the stories, I'm afraid, Caroline, the stories are complex and involved, and they do pull you in, and I mean, I think what you've said is really good, because it is a story-based game, I would say. And so for people like me who like that story-based thing, it sort of pulls you in, but it is also quite an action-packed. It's almost like, like a glorified platformer, really, in a lot of ways, because it's just like run along, kill these monsters, run along, kill these monsters, pick these things up, fly to that, mountain or whatever. So, and I think it's nice. They were saying in one of the reviews something about they couldn't tell when it was Zelda and when it was Link. So that suggests that you can play both. I don't know about that.
No, and I'm not clear on that, but there was some people saying they're quite disappointed it's still focusing on Link rather than Zelda.
Yeah.
I've gone back because, as I say, E3 has just made me so happy. So basically, I ditched work at 2:00 today and dragged out my Wii U and started playing Breath of the Wild. Because why not? And one of the things that struck me while playing it is how, I mean, Link has always been, quite androgynous in some ways. Going back to
Link could easily be.
Yeah, but I was feeling like the most recent incarnations, it's pretty gender fluid. Link, there's no reason. Link's not a hunky macho male, and never has been and never will be. And I think that, so it bothers me less that it's a male protagonist, because he's a very gender neutral protagonist in many ways. And they haven't got any of that nonsense going on. But obviously it would be nice to see Zelda playing a little bit more of an active role. Like getting Princess Peach to save herself. We get Zelda to save herself. That's the Neil Gaiman quote, which is, "I like the stories where women save themselves."
Yeah.
Right. I suddenly realised we are getting near the end, so I will do the two bits I normally do, which is one, the Caroline hasn't let me say this all evening. Is there a game that we haven't mentioned that we need to talk about? We only skimmed over Elden Ring.
True.
Which I feel like we just ought to mention a little bit more. Mostly, Matt is hopefully going to do us a little catch-up video, but he did send some videos, some images. He did send the image of the horse jumping up an entire mountain, which I was like, wow, what's going on there? Also, just the whole trailer, I did feel, having George R.R. Martin but also having, I've forgotten their name, the Japanese
Band something.
We won't.
Namiko Bankai.
Wrong.
Yes.
And fill in description, but I felt like you could see those two influences merging. Like there was sort of like, yes, there was that high fantasy, but also there was some of those enemies where I was like, what is that?
There were so many arms. So many arms. That's what I'm taking away from the trailer. Arms.
Arms everywhere. So we've mentioned Elden Ring. Is there any other games we should have mentioned?
I want to mention Worms.
Oh yeah, Worms is good.
Just because it's come so far since I played it many moons ago. I was like, I loved that game. The first time when it first came out, I loved it. I played it a lot, and so it's.
Is it moving to Nintendo? Is that where you've found it?
Yeah.
I think I read it was moving to the Switch. Yeah.
I think Worms are actually originally PC based, but I think Sega had it at some point. But it's passed through a lot of hands, Worms, over the years. But I as you say, Jen, I think everyone's got different editions of it that they like. Like they have their own particular nostalgic memory of a version of Worms. Yes, Worms. I just like that.
Yeah.
Worms. Yes, please do feel free to shout in the chat if there's any games we haven't mentioned that you think we should have mentioned.
One other one I was going to mention, sorry, I'll jump in. The surprise drop by Ubisoft of Avatar.
Yes, of course, sorry.
Which came out of nowhere. Which I am on the fence about because, it's like, how old is the movie now? It came out in 2009. There are kids these days that weren't even born when it came out. This is how old we all are now.
Some of us are mothers of them.
But no, I think it's obviously been done to tie into the upcoming Avatar sequels, one of which is due out at the end of the year. But I feel like a lot of it just looked like the movie had been copied and pasted into game world. No doubt it looks impressive, and I'll be interested to see what it's like. I've heard it's first person, which is putting it down a notch in my books because you know how I feel about first person. But there wasn't too much. They did say it was taken from the game engine footage, but whether it was actual gameplay footage, I don't know. So I'm not sure what kind of game it will be, but I'll be interested to see what happens. And they must have paid a lot of money for the rights to it. That's all I'm going to say.
It did look hella pretty. It was like, wow. I've never sat through Avatar, I'll admit that.
You've never watched it all? Oh, you should. But then again,
can't be bothered.
It's basically Pocahontas, kind of, but with the genders reversed. I guess, maybe. Actually, no, that's wrong. Ignore me. I
think it always struck me as I have enough fantasy nonsense in my life and I didn't need Avatar. Jem?
Did I watch it? Yeah, I went and saw it at the cinema.
Of course.
Oh, I saw it 3D because that was like new then. It was super exciting.
Back when 3D was
that might have been the last time I went to the cinema. It feels like the last time I went to but no, I was wowed by it. I was just like I was a bit snooty about the story because it felt a little bit too polished. It felt that there was lots about the story that annoyed me, but I loved the imagery and the world, and it was nice. It was like a big performance. It was like back to the days where people used to applaud in the cinema. Oh, I'm really showing my age now. When people played the piano and nobody on the screen talked.
No, as you say, like they did mention it was made using I believe their Snowdrop engine.
That's
and I was watching that trailer just going, God, I have no interest in Avatar, but wow, this looks pretty. And again, it's one of those things that then makes you go, let's buy a PS5. Oh no, we can't, because I mean, it's like you say, because I was going to say about the Xbox stuff. You can get Xbox on PC. I had that for a while with the Xbox Game Pass on PC, and it is, if you're using it, is good value because it's like a £5 a month and you have access to all the games. But as soon as you stop paying it, you don't have access to the games anymore. So it's that sort of balance. But there was a few games there that I was like, might renew that. The last game I wanted to mention was Psychonauts 2, which I am, to steal their joke, so psyched about. Because the original Psychonauts was just such a, it was one of the first things I played on my Xbox, actually. It's absolutely phenomenally brilliant game because it manages to balance that being silly and kid-like and humorous with brilliant gameplay and actually being really enjoyable to play as well. So the fact that it's been 10 years, maybe even more, to get the sequel, I'm pretty damned excited about. And it's only in August as well. August the 25th is when we're getting it. So.
Not long. It's not long. I've not played the original, but I know that it's got massive cult status and is well liked by a lot of people. So I should check it out, really.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Right. We've run out of time. So you need to, like, if there's any games you want to talk about now, you literally need to just shout their names.
No.
Well, that's good. I am going to ask you very, very quickly, because who cares about time? It's a construct. If you were in charge of next year's E3, what would you want to make sure was there? What would you want to see? What game would you want to see? What panel would you want to see? What change to the whole thing would you want to see? If you were running next year's E3, what change would you make? That was my wild card question. But it's not that wild card because it's on topic, but it's the one I hadn't told you about beforehand, so it's still wild card. And I'm talking so you have time to think.
I'd have I'd make sure that there were more women on the chat, on the panel that's organising the event, because make sure there was more diversity, actually, just in base level, and I would have conversations like the ones that we're having, and I would make that more than just a sort of on the edges thing. I would make that like a core sort of central thing, and I would go out of my way to highlight games that are championing those issues, and to demonstrate that there is money in it and that people want it and that it can be done. So I do believe in positive discrimination. I hate that word, but positively putting people forward, because we don't live on a level playing field. So
exactly, it's not positive discrimination. It's just leveling the playing field.
Yeah, exactly.
Advantage. Alex, what change would you make?
I'm going to be very similar and say the discussions you mentioned and panels you mentioned, I wasn't aware were even happening in this E3, and I was a bit bummed out that I'd missed them, because I'd be very interested to watch them. So I'll have to go find them later. But basically, as Jem said, putting those more a central thing, but also making it less of a passive thing. So where E3 is like this, these are the games that you can consume them, look forward to them, spend your money on these things. It would be more of an active thing where gamers can actually contribute more to discussions and their voices are heard a lot more. And it's more of an active thing than a passive, these are the games we want you to buy them now kind of thing. That's what I would say, definitely.
Yeah. I'm going to steal both of your points, which is because one, I saw a thing on Twitter earlier today, which was exactly what you were just saying, Jem, which is it's all very well if you've got women and people of colour and minorities represented on screen, but if they're not the people behind the scenes running it and making the decisions, then quite often the representation at the front ends up tokenistic and bollocks, basically. Yeah. And Alex, as you say, I'd like to see, they do have like these little hook bits in between where there's a streamer comes on and says, I like this game because that. But I think there are so many brilliant streamers and content generators out there that I want to see them hosting it. I want to see them hosting it the way they want to host it as well, rather than this horribly cheesy, the bits in between, as I say, they're just uncomfortably scripted and unpleasant to the point where I have to mute the TV. So
Ubisoft had a terrible pun in every line. I think Ubisoft just threw in so many puns. It was really dreadful.
It's just
so
uncomfortable.
Bad.
And there are brilliant people out there who could do such a better job of it. Let the community take the show over and make it good. Make it brilliant. Woohoo! Right, on that note, I think we shall leave you. Next show, we shall be reflecting on our 6 months, woo, of doing Gaming the System. So in the meantime, please do, if you're watching on YouTube or something else visual, I haven't got Matt here to do this, so I've got to struggle my way through it. Like, share, and subscribe. And I believe that podcasting, if you're on Spotify, yay, share and subscribe. If you're on Apple, iTunes, whatever that thing is, then you have to leave a review and stars, and that's good as well. So we've been Gaming the System. Goodbye.
Bye.